My husband died 10 years ago. Every month, I transferred $500 to pay off his debts. But one day the bank called me. Miss, your husband never had any debts. When I asked where my money was, they told me. Good day, dear listeners. It's Louisa again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. Life before that phone call seemed simple enough. My name is Margaret. I'm 72 years old, and for the past 10 years, I'd been living alone in our old house in Sacramento. My husband Robert died of a heart attack back in 2015, leaving me with memories, his reading glasses still on the nightstand, and what I believed was a mountain of debt. Robert had always handled our finances. I trusted him completely. So when his cousin Janet came to me right after the funeral, tearful and concerned, explaining that Robert had borrowed heavily from the bank before he died, I believed her without question. She showed me papers, documents that looked official enough to my grief-clouded eyes. "The bank will come after the house, Margaret," she'd said, squeezing my hand. "But I can help you. Send me $500 every month and I'll make sure they get paid. I have connections there. They'll work with us." $500. It wasn't easy on my widow's pension and Social Security, but I managed. I cut coupons, stopped my book club membership, ate less meat. Every month, like clockwork, I'd go to Western Union and wire the money to Janet's account. Every month, she'd text me, "Received. You're doing great, Margaret. We're getting there." 10 years. 120 payments. $60,000. I never questioned it. Why would I? Janet was family. She'd been at our wedding, held Robert's hand in the hospital. When you're grieving, when you're alone, you cling to the people who seem to care. But last Tuesday, everything shattered. I was making coffee in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Robert used to read the morning paper, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, thinking it was another scam call about my car's extended warranty. "Mrs. Henderson," a professional woman's voice. "This is Catherine Wu from First National Bank. I'm calling about your late husband's account." My heart dropped. Had I missed a payment? Had Janet forgotten to send it through? Yes, this is Margaret Henderson, I said, gripping the counter. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm looking at our records here, and I need to clarify something. We've never had any outstanding loans or debts associated with your husband, Robert Henderson's account. In fact, his accounts were closed and settled within weeks of his passing in 2015. There's nothing owed to this institution." The coffee pot stopped dripping. The kitchen went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. "What?" I whispered. "You're not in debt to us, ma'am. You never were. Is there a reason you're asking about this now?" My legs felt weak. I pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down heavily. Someone told me I've been making payments." "Payments to whom?" That's when it hit me. Really hit me. Not to the bank. Never to the bank. To Janet. "Mrs. Henderson, are you still there?" "I need to go," I managed to say and hung up. I sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. My hands were shaking. $60,000, 10 years of sacrifice, the vacations I didn't take, the gifts I couldn't give my grandchildren, the dental work I postponed because I needed that $500 for Robert's debt. There was no debt. There had never been any debt. I walked to my bedroom, opened the bottom drawer of my dresser where I kept all the important papers. Every Western Union receipt, neatly filed by year. Every text message from Janet, which I'd screenshot and printed out because I wasn't good with phones and wanted records. "You're doing great, Margaret. Almost there. Robert would be so proud." My vision blurred with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were something else entirely. something hot and sharp. Who else knew? Was Janet alone in this? Or had others been laughing behind my back all these years? Every family gathering, every Christmas dinner, every birthday party. Had they all known? I picked up my phone again with trembling fingers. I needed answers. I needed to understand how deep this betrayal went. But first, I needed to know exactly where my money had gone. I spread all the receipts across my dining table, 120 of them, like a paper trail of my own foolishness. My reading glasses kept slipping down my nose as I calculated, recalculated, hoping somehow I'd been wrong. $60,000. The number stared back at me from my calculator, unchanging and cruel. That money could have paid for my granddaughter Emma's college tuition. It could have fixed the roof that still leaked in the corner of the spare bedroom. It could have been the European trip Robert and I always planned, but never took. Instead, it had gone into Janet's pockets. I made myself a cup of tea, chamomile to calm my nerves, and tried to think clearly. At 72, I wasn't the sharp young woman I used to be, but I wasn't senile either. I'd raised 3 children, managed a household, worked 20 years as a school secretary. I knew how to organize, how to plan, how to solve problems. The question was, what exactly was I dealing with? I pulled out my laptop, the one my son David had bought me 2 Christmases ago. My fingers moved slowly over the keyboard as I logged into my email. I searched for anything from First National Bank. There it was, the estate settlement notice from 2015, clearly stating that all of Robert's accounts had been settled with no outstanding obligations. I'd received this email. I'd read it. But then Janet had come to me with those papers, and I'd... What? Chosen to believe family over a corporate email? Assumed there was something the bank wasn't telling me? Number. I'd been grieving and vulnerable, and she'd known it. My phone buzzed. A text from Janet. Hi, Margaret, just checking in. Did this month's payment go through okay? Haven't seen it yet. The audacity, the absolute audacity. My first instinct was to call her immediately, to scream, to demand answers. But something stopped me. Maybe it was all those years of watching Law and Order with Robert. Or maybe it was just common sense kicking in. If I confronted her now, she'd have time to prepare, to hide evidence, to spin a story. I needed to be smarter than that. I texted back. Sorry, Janet. Had some issues with Western Union. We'll send it tomorrow. Her response came within seconds. No worries. These things happen. Take your time. That heart emoji made my stomach turn. I stood up and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the garden Robert had planted. The roses he'd loved were blooming, red and defiant against the spring sky. What would he say if he knew? Robert, who'd trusted his cousin, who'd invited her to every family event, who'd lent her money when she claimed her car had broken down. He'd be furious. He'd demand justice. And so would I. I sat back down and opened a new document on my computer. At the top, I typed, evidence. Below it, I started listing everything I knew. Bank confirms no debt existed. 120 payments of $500 to Janet's account equals $60,000. Western Union receipts, all saved. Text messages from Janet, printed copies. Original documents, Janet showed me. Where were these? That last point bothered me. Where were those papers Janet had shown me in 2015? I'd been so overwhelmed by grief that I'd just handed them back to her, trusting she'd handle everything. I'd never kept copies. That was my first mistake. I wouldn't make another. I picked up my phone and called my son David in Portland. He was a software engineer, practical and level-headed. He answered on the 3rd ring. Mom? Everything okay? David, I need your help with something, I said, keeping my voice steady. It's complicated, and I don't want you to worry. but I need to ask you about legal matters." "Legal matters? Mom, what's going on?" I took a deep breath. "If someone has been taking money from you under false pretenses for years, what's that called legally?" There was a pause. "That's fraud, Mom. Potentially wire fraud if it crossed state lines." "Why? Who's been taking money from you?" "I need to be sure first," I said. "Before I say anything to anyone, I need to gather evidence. Can you help me understand what I'd need to prove it?" "Mom, you're scaring me." "I'm fine, honey. I promise. I just need to know. If I have receipts showing I sent money, and messages from someone acknowledging they received it, and proof that the reason they gave me was false, is that enough?" "It's a start," David said carefully. "But Mom, seriously, what's—" "I'll explain everything soon," I interrupted. "But first, I need to make a plan. Can you email me information about fraud? What evidence matters, what I should document?" "I'll do better than that. I'm coming down this weekend." "No, David, you don't need to—" "Mom," his voice was firm. "I'm coming. We'll figure this out together." After we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in 10 years. Not alone. I looked at my list again. I had receipts. I had messages. I had the bank's confirmation. Now I needed everything else. David arrived Friday evening, his face tight with worry. He'd driven 5 hours straight from Portland without stopping. I'd made his favorite pot roast, but neither of us had much appetite as I laid out everything on the dining table, the receipts, the printed texts, the bank's email. He went very quiet as he read through it all. Then he looked up at me, his jaw clenched in a way that reminded me so much of his father. "Aunt Janet did this to you? I need to be absolutely certain before I accuse her," I said, though my hands trembled as I poured us both coffee. "I need proof that those papers she showed me were fake. I need to know if anyone else was involved." David pulled out his laptop. "First thing Monday, we're going to the bank in person. We'll get official documentation. Then we're talking to a lawyer." That weekend felt like the longest of my life. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Janet's face at Robert's funeral, her hand on my shoulder, her voice so full of false concern. How long had she planned this? Had she waited for Robert to die? Or had she been scheming even before? Monday morning, David and I walked into First National Bank at exactly 9 o'clock. Catherine Wu, the woman who'd called me, met us in a small conference room. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes that sharpened when David explained why we were there. "Mrs. Henderson, I'm going to be very direct with you," she said, after pulling up Robert's account history on her computer. "Your husband had no loans with us, ever. In fact, his credit was excellent. When he passed, there was a small checking account and a savings account, both of which were transferred to you as the beneficiary. The estate was settled cleanly." "Can you give us documentation of that?" David asked. "Absolutely." Catherine printed out several pages, account statements, the estate settlement, everything. Then she leaned forward. "Mrs. Henderson, if someone has been telling you otherwise and taking money from you, that's fraud. You should file a police report." "We will," David said. "But first, we need to establish a complete picture of what happened." After the bank, we went to see a lawyer David had found, Susan Morrison, a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in elder fraud. Her office was in a modern building downtown, very different from the small-town lawyers I was used to. Susan listened to everything without interrupting. Then she said, "Margaret, what was done to you is textbook financial exploitation. In California, this is both a civil and criminal matter. You could press charges, and you could sue for the return of your money plus damages." "Will I get it back?" I asked. "The money?" "That depends on whether Janet has assets," Susan said carefully. "But yes, you have a very strong case. The question is, do you want to pursue this criminally, civilly, or both? I thought of all those years, all those sacrifices, that heart emoji. Both, I said firmly. Susan nodded with approval. Then here's what we do. First, we need to document everything, and I mean everything. Second, we need to find out if Janet acted alone or if others were involved. Third, we file a police report. Don't contact Janet yet. Don't let her know what you know. But it was already too late for that. That evening, as David and I were reviewing documents at my kitchen table, my phone rang. It was my daughter-in-law, Beth, David's wife. "Margaret, Janet just called me," Beth said, her voice confused. "She said you went to the bank today asking questions about Robert's estate." She sounded, I don't know, nervous. She wanted to know if you were okay, if you were confused about something. What's going on? My blood ran cold. Someone at the bank must have mentioned my visit, or maybe Janet had contacts there. Small cities were like that. Everyone knew everyone. David saw my face change. "What is it?" I put the phone on speaker. "Beth, what exactly did Janet say?" "She said she was worried about you, that grief can make people remember things incorrectly, and that if you had questions about Robert's debts, she could help clarify things." She sounded really concerned, but also kind of pushy. "She wanted me to have you call her right away." "Don't tell her anything," David said immediately. "Mom's fine. We're just sorting through some old paperwork." After Beth hung up, David and I looked at each other. "She knows," I said quietly. "She knows I'm investigating." "Good," David said, his voice hard. "Let her worry. We're just getting started." The next morning, Susan called. "Margaret, I did some preliminary research on Janet Henderson. Did you know she filed for bankruptcy 3 years ago and that she's currently being sued by 2 credit card companies?" My stomach dropped. "No, I had no idea." "She's in serious financial trouble," Susan continued. "Has been for years. Your money wasn't going to pay off imaginary debts, Margaret. It was keeping her afloat." I sat down heavily. $60,000 feeding Janet's lifestyle while I ate day-old bread and skipped medications to save money. "There's something else," Susan said. "I found property records. Janet owns a vacation condo in Lake Tahoe, purchased in 2017, 2 years into your payments." That's when I knew. This wasn't desperation. This was calculated, deliberate theft. And I was going to make sure she paid for every single dollar. Susan advised me to file a police report immediately, before Janet could hide assets or create false documentation. Wednesday afternoon, David drove me to the Sacramento Police Department. The detective who took my statement was a tired-looking man named Garcia, who'd probably heard 1,000 sad stories just like mine. Except mine wasn't just sad, it was theft. I showed him everything: the bank statements, Susan's documentation, the receipts, the text messages. Detective Garcia's expression grew grimmer as he read through it all. "Mrs. Henderson, I'll be honest with you," he said. "These cases can be complicated. Family financial exploitation often comes down to he said, she said. But you've done something very smart. You've documented everything. That helps tremendously." "What happens now?" I asked. "I'll open an investigation. We'll contact Ms. Henderson for questioning. I should warn you, though, she'll probably lawyer up immediately, and this could take time." "I have time," I said. "I'm 72, not dead." David squeezed my hand. That evening, I was washing dishes when my phone rang. Janet. My hand froze over the soapy water. David, who was drying, immediately said, "Don't answer it." But I did. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to hear her voice now that I knew the truth. Wanted to see if I could detect the lies I'd missed for 10 years. "Margaret." Janet's voice was bright, forcedly cheerful. I've been trying to reach you. Beth said you went to the bank? Is everything all right? Everything's fine, Janet, I said calmly. Just reviewing some old paperwork. Oh, good. You had me worried. You know, at our age, sometimes things get confusing. If you have questions about Robert's debts, I have all the documentation. Actually, Janet, the bank told me something interesting, I interrupted. They said Robert never had any debts. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then, well, they must be mistaken. You know how banks are. They showed me the estate settlement. Everything was paid and closed in 2015. Another pause. When Janet spoke again, her voice had changed. The sweetness was gone, replaced by something sharper. Margaret, I think you're confused. I've been helping you all these years. Where did my $60,000 go, Janet? What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Where is my money? Her voice turned cold. You should be very careful about making accusations, Margaret. Very careful. You're an elderly woman living alone. People might think you're suffering from dementia, making up stories. Is that a threat? David grabbed the phone from my hand and put it on speaker. David? Janet's tone shifted again, attempting warmth. Oh, thank God. Your mother is very confused right now. She needs help. The only thing my mother needs is her $60,000 back, David said flatly. We've filed a police report. You'll be contacted for questioning. The silence this time was longer. When Janet spoke, all pretense was gone. You're making a huge mistake, both of you. I have lawyers. I have documentation. I have witnesses who will say your mother was fully aware of every payment, that she was paying back money Robert borrowed from M.E. personally, not the bank. This is family business, and if you drag it through the courts, you'll look like ungrateful. David hung up. I sat down at the kitchen table, my legs shaking. She's going to fight this. Of course she is, David said. She's a thief, and thieves don't go quietly. But Mom, we have the truth on our side. The next day, Thursday, things escalated. My daughter Linda called from Phoenix, upset. Mom, I just got off the phone with Aunt Janet. She's saying you're accusing her of stealing from you, that you're sick and confused. She's calling everyone in the family. I'm not confused, Linda, I said tiredly. I'm being defrauded. But Aunt Janet said, Janet has been taking $500 a month from me for 10 years under the pretense that Robert had bank debts. The bank confirms no such debts existed. I have proof. Linda went quiet. Oh my God. She's trying to turn the family against me before the truth comes out, I explained. Don't believe her. But the damage was already done. Over the next 2 days, I received calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, all concerned about my mental state. Janet had clearly been busy, spinning her narrative, the devoted cousin helping her confused elderly relative, now being unfairly accused. Friday afternoon, Janet showed up at my house. I was in the garden pruning Robert's roses when I heard the car pull up. David had gone back to Portland that morning. He had work obligations. But we'd installed a doorbell camera, and my phone buzzed with the alert. Janet stood at my front door, perfectly dressed in a cream pantsuit, her face composed. She rang the doorbell 3 times. I didn't answer. She walked around to the backyard gate. Margaret, I know you're here. Your car's in the driveway. We need to talk. I set down my pruning shears and faced her through the fence. My lawyer advised me not to speak with you. Your lawyer? Janet laughed, but it sounded forced. Margaret, this is ridiculous. We're family. We can work this out without lawyers and police. You stole $60,000 from me. I didn't steal anything. Her voice rose. I helped you. All these years, I've been helping you, and this is the thanks I get? You're going to humiliate me, humiliate our whole family, because you can't keep your facts straight? The facts are perfectly straight, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. You lied about debts that didn't exist. You took money under false pretenses. That's fraud. Janet's face flushed red. You have no idea what you're doing. If you push this, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. I'll tell them how you neglected Robert in his final years, how you refused to help family members in need. Get off my property, I said quietly. You're going to regret this, Margaret. I promise you that. She left, her car screeching slightly as she pulled away. I stood in the garden, surrounded by Robert's roses, and for the first time since this began, I felt genuinely afraid. But I also felt something else. Absolutely certain I was doing the right thing. I went inside, locked all the doors, and called Susan Morrison. She came to your house? Susan's voice was sharp. That's witness intimidation. Document it. Write down everything she said right now while it's fresh. I did. Then I took 2 aspirin, made chamomile tea, and sat in Robert's favorite chair. I needed a few days to recover. This was harder than I'd expected. But I wasn't stopping. For 3 days, I allowed myself to rest. David called every morning and evening. Linda flew in from Phoenix for the weekend, apologetic and furious once I showed her all the evidence. My youngest son, James, sent flowers with a card that simply said, "I'm proud of you, Mom." But the real support came from an unexpected place. Sunday afternoon, there was a knock on my door. Through the camera, I saw Eleanor Pritchard, my neighbor of 15 years. Eleanor was 81, sharp as a tack, and had been widowed even longer than I had. She was holding a casserole dish. "I heard," she said simply when I opened the door. "The whole neighborhood's talking about it. That woman has some nerve showing up here, shouting at you." I hadn't realized anyone had witnessed Janet's visit. "You saw that?" "Heard it from my kitchen window," Eleanor said, walking past me into the house like she owned it. "Also heard you tell her to get off your property. Good for you, Margaret. Now, I brought chicken pot pie, and we're going to talk." Over the next hour, Eleanor told me something I hadn't known. She'd been scammed by her own nephew 5 years ago. A different scheme, but the same betrayal. Family taking advantage of grief and trust. "I got my money back," Eleanor said firmly. "Took 2 years and a court battle, but I got every penny. And you will too if you don't let them break you." "Did your family turn against you?" I asked quietly. "Some did. The ones who were either in on it or too cowardly to face the truth. But the ones who mattered stayed. Your Linda came all the way from Phoenix. Your boys are supporting you. That's what matters." She was right. I wasn't alone. That evening, Detective Garcia called. "Mrs. Henderson, we contacted Janet Henderson for questioning. She came in with a lawyer and declined to make a statement. But here's the interesting part. Her lawyer tried to offer a settlement." My heart jumped. "What kind of settlement?" "They're willing to pay you $10,000 to drop the investigation and sign an NDA. $10,000 out of 60. "That's an admission of guilt," I said. "That's exactly what it is," Garcia agreed. "She wouldn't offer anything if she wasn't worried. But Mrs. Henderson, I have to tell you, if you accept any settlement, we can't continue the criminal investigation." "I'm not accepting anything," I said immediately. "I want my money back. All of it. And I want her held accountable." "Good. I was hoping you'd say that." Monday morning, Janet's lawyer called Susan Morrison. Susan called me afterward, sounding both amused and disgusted. "They've increased the offer to $25,000, Susan reported. Plus, they're claiming that you verbally agreed to help Janet with her financial difficulties, that the payments were voluntary gifts, not fraud." "That's a lie." Of course it's a lie, but they're trying to muddy the waters. They're also threatening to countersue for defamation if you continue to slander Janet to family members. I felt a cold calm settle over me. Let them try. Margaret, I need to be clear with you about what's ahead. This could get uglier before it gets better. They're going to attack your credibility, your memory, your mental capacity. They might drag your children into depositions. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Robert's roses, blooming faithfully every year. I thought about the roof I couldn't fix, the vacations I couldn't take, the dental work I'd postponed. I thought about my granddaughter, Emma, who'd taken out student loans because I couldn't help her. I'm prepared, I said. That week, something unexpected happened. My story started spreading beyond family. Linda had mentioned it to her book club. Eleanor had told her church group. Suddenly, people I barely knew were stopping me at the grocery store, sharing their own stories of being exploited by relatives, offering support. A local senior advocacy group called, asking if I'd be willing to speak about elder financial abuse once my case was resolved. A reporter from the Sacramento Bee requested an interview. I declined the interview. Susan advised against speaking publicly while the investigation was ongoing. But I started to realize something. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every widow who'd been lied to, every senior who'd been taken advantage of, every person who'd trusted family and been betrayed. Wednesday evening, I was watering the roses when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You still have time to make this go away quietly. Think about your grandchildren. Do they really need to see their grandmother dragged through court, humiliated? Take the settlement. Move on. I showed it to David on our nightly video call. That's witness tampering, he said, his face hard. Forward it to Detective Garcia immediately. I did. Garcia called back within an hour. Mrs. Henderson, we can trace this, but I need to ask, are these intimidation attempts working? Are you considering backing down? No, I said simply. I'm not. Good, because we just subpoenaed Janet's bank records. This case is building. After I hung up, I sat in Robert's chair and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Powerful, not weak, not confused, not like a victim, like someone who was going to win. Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after I'd filed the police report, 3 people showed up at my door. Janet, her husband Tom, and Robert's brother Harold. I watched them through the doorbell camera. Janet looked tired, less polished than usual. Tom stood beside her, uncomfortable in his suit. Harold, whom I hadn't seen since Robert's funeral, looked embarrassed. They rang the doorbell. I didn't answer. Margaret, please, Harold called out. We just want to talk, as family. Against my better judgment and Susan's explicit instructions, I opened the door. But I didn't invite them in. What do you want? I asked, keeping my hand on the doorframe. To apologize, Janet said, and for a moment, she almost sounded sincere. Margaret, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Can we please come in and discuss this like adults? Like family? No, I said simply. Tom shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Henderson, this has gotten out of hand. Lawyers, police, it's tearing the family apart. Janet tore the family apart when she stole from me, I replied. Nobody stole anything, Janet's voice cracked. I was helping you. Yes, maybe I should have been clearer about the arrangement. Maybe I should have given you better documentation, but I was trying to protect you, to make things easier. By lying about debts that didn't exist. Harold stepped forward. Margaret, Robert wouldn't have wanted this. He wouldn't have wanted his wife and his cousin fighting in court, destroying the family. That struck a nerve, and they saw it. They'd brought Harold specifically for this, to invoke Robert's memory, to make me feel guilty. Robert wouldn't have wanted his cousin stealing from his widow either, I said, my voice shaking slightly. It wasn't stealing. Janet's composure was cracking. You know what? Fine. I used some of that money for my own expenses. I was in a difficult financial situation and I thought you wouldn't miss it. You have your pension, your Social Security, this house. I was drowning in debt. I was about to lose everything. So you decided to take my everything instead. I was going to pay you back. Janet's eyes were wild now. That's why I kept taking the money. I was trying to get stable enough to pay you back. But then you went to the bank, started this investigation, got lawyers involved. You've ruined everything. There it was. The truth, finally. Tom grabbed Janet's arm. Jan, stop talking. But she couldn't stop. Do you know what you've done? They're going to take my condo, my car, everything I've worked for, and for what? You'll never see that money anyway. It's gone. I spent it keeping my life together while you sat in this big house feeling sorry for yourself. Get off my property, I said, my voice ice cold. All of you. Harold tried once more. Margaret, please. If you drop this, we can work out a payment plan. Janet will pay you back over time. With what money? She just said it's all gone. We'll figure something out, Tom pleaded. Please, we have 3 kids. If she goes to jail. She should have thought about that before she stole $60,000 from me. Janet's face twisted with rage and desperation. You self-righteous bitch. You think you're so noble, so victimized? You're just a bitter old woman with nothing better to do than destroy people's lives. I'm the victim of fraud, I said calmly, and you're a thief. Those are facts, not opinions. You'll regret this, Janet screamed as Tom tried to pull her back toward their car. I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are. I'll tell them how you turned your back on family, how you… Janet, let's go. Tom practically dragged her to the car. Harold lingered on my doorstep. She's desperate, Margaret. Desperate people do desperate things. Please, reconsider. Desperate people should have reconsidered before committing crimes, I said, and closed the door. Through the window, I watched them drive away. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. Part of me felt terrible. These were people I'd known for decades. People at my wedding, at Robert's funeral. But another part of me felt something clearer than ever. Resolve. I called Susan Morrison immediately. They came to your house? Susan sounded both alarmed and excited. What did they say? I recounted the entire conversation, including Janet's admission that she'd used my money for her own expenses. Margaret, that's a confession, Susan said. An angry, unfiltered confession. Do you have any of it recorded? The doorbell camera has audio, I remembered suddenly. Save that footage immediately. Don't delete it. Don't let it record over. This is exactly what we need. After I hung up, I sat down heavily on the couch. My whole body felt like it had been through a battle. I was 72 years old. I should be spending my days gardening, seeing my grandchildren, enjoying retirement. Instead, I was fighting a war. But as I sat there, remembering Janet's twisted face, her screamed insults, her admission of guilt, I felt something unexpected. Not fear, not doubt, determination. Let them come with their tears and their threats and their manipulations. I wasn't backing down. I was just getting started. The court date arrived 6 weeks later on a gray October morning. It wasn't a criminal trial yet. That would come later if the DA decided to prosecute, but a civil hearing for my lawsuit seeking restitution. Susan had explained that this was our chance to present evidence to force Janet to defend herself under oath. David flew in from Portland. Linda drove up from Phoenix. Even James came from Seattle. My children sat behind me in the courtroom, a wall of support. Across the aisle, Janet sat with her lawyer, Marcus Webb, an expensive attorney she clearly couldn't afford. Her face was pale and she wouldn't look at me. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Patricia Brennan. She had a reputation, Susan told me, for having zero tolerance for elder fraud. "Ms. Morrison, you may begin," Judge Brennan said. Susan stood, composed and professional. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of financial exploitation. Mrs. Margaret Henderson, a widow, was told by the defendant that her deceased husband had outstanding bank debts. For 10 years, Mrs. Henderson sent $500 monthly to the defendant, a total of $60,000, believing she was paying off these debts. In reality, no such debts existed. The defendant knew this and accepted the money anyway." She presented the bank statements, the estate documents, the Western Union receipts. Every piece of evidence we'd gathered laid out methodically. Then came the doorbell camera footage. The courtroom went silent as Janet's voice filled the room. "I used some of that money for my own expenses. I thought you wouldn't miss it. I was drowning in debt." I watched Janet's face crumble as she heard her own words. Marcus Webb stood quickly. "Your Honor, my client was under extreme emotional duress during that encounter." "Your client confessed to taking money under false pretenses," Judge Brennan interrupted. "Continue, Ms. Morrison." Susan called Detective Garcia to testify about the investigation. Then she called Catherine Wu from the bank, who confirmed under oath that Robert Henderson had never had any outstanding loans or debts. Finally, Susan called me. I walked to the witness stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. At 72, I'd never been in a courtroom like this before. But I wasn't nervous. I'd lived this nightmare for 10 years. Now I was finally telling the truth. "Mrs. Henderson," Susan began gently, "can you describe what happened after your husband's death?" I told the story from the beginning. Janet's visit right after the funeral, the papers she'd shown me, the decade of payments, the sacrifices I'd made, the postponed dental work, the canceled vacations, the help I couldn't give my grandchildren. "I trusted her," I said, looking directly at Janet. "She was family. She'd been at my wedding. She held my husband's hand when he was dying. How could I not trust her?" Janet was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone who'd been caught. Marcus Webb cross-examined me, trying to suggest I'd been confused, that maybe I'd misunderstood Janet's intentions, that perhaps the payments had been voluntary family assistance. "Mr. Webb," I said calmly, "I'm 72, not senile. I know the difference between helping family and being lied to. Janet told me my husband had debts. The bank says he didn't. That's not confusion. That's fraud." Then Janet was called to testify. She took the stand reluctantly. Under Marcus's gentle questioning, she tried to paint herself as a victim too. Financially desperate, trying to help family while struggling herself, never meaning to deceive anyone. "So you're saying Mrs. Henderson knew the money wasn't going to the bank?" Susan asked during cross-examination. She must have known." "Must have? Did you explicitly tell her the money was for your personal use and not for bank debts?" It was complicated. Yes or no, Ms. Henderson? Did you tell your cousin that her husband had no bank debts and you needed money for yourself?" Janet's silence lasted too long. "No," she finally whispered. "And did you show Mrs. Henderson fake documents suggesting debts existed?" "They weren't fake. I was trying to help her understand." "Understand what? A lie?" Marcus objected. But the damage was done. Janet was unraveling on the stand, contradicting herself, unable to maintain her story under pressure. Susan presented one final piece of evidence: Janet's bank records, subpoenaed by Detective Garcia. They showed deposits of $500, regular as clockwork, for 10 years. They also showed purchases at luxury stores, vacations to Hawaii, the down payment on the Lake Tahoe condo. "Your Honor," Susan said, "the evidence is overwhelming. Ms. Janet Henderson systematically defrauded an elderly widow of $60,000 through lies and fabricated documents. She spent this money on personal luxuries while Mrs. Henderson sacrificed basic necessities. We ask that the court order full restitution, plus punitive damages and legal fees. Judge Brennan removed her glasses and looked directly at Janet. Ms. Henderson, I've presided over many cases of financial abuse. This is one of the most calculated and callous I've seen. You exploited your cousin's grief, her trust, and her isolation. You invented debts that didn't exist. You accepted money for a decade while watching her struggle, knowing she was sacrificing to pay you. Janet's lawyer started to speak, but Judge Brennan held up her hand. I'm not finished. The evidence presented here is not only sufficient for a civil judgment, it suggests criminal fraud. I'm ordering you to pay full restitution of $60,000 plus $30,000 in punitive damages, plus Mrs. Henderson's legal fees. Additionally, I'm forwarding this case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution consideration. Janet collapsed in her chair, sobbing. I felt David's hand on my shoulder. Linda was crying quietly behind me. It was over. I'd won. The courtroom cleared slowly. Janet's family left through a side door, avoiding eye contact with everyone. I watched them go and felt nothing. No triumph, no vindication. Just a quiet certainty that justice had been served. Susan pulled me aside in the hallway. Margaret, this was a decisive victory, but I need to prepare you. Collecting the money might be challenging. Janet filed for bankruptcy 3 years ago. She may not have $90,000 liquid. Then she'll sell the condo, I said simply, and the car, and whatever else she bought with my money. Susan smiled. That's exactly what will happen. The court will garnish her wages, seize assets, whatever it takes. You'll get your money back. It might take time, but you'll get it. That evening, Detective Garcia called. Mrs. Henderson, the DA reviewed the case. They're moving forward with criminal charges, wire fraud, elder abuse, and theft. Janet Henderson will be arraigned next month. What does that mean for her? I asked. If convicted, she's looking at several years in prison, maybe 5 to 7, given the amount and duration of the fraud. I thought about that. Janet in prison. Her children growing up with their mother behind bars. Her husband struggling alone. Part of me felt the weight of those consequences, but then I remembered 10 years of sacrifice, 10 years of lies, $60,000, the heart emojis, the fake concern. Good, I said. Over the next 3 months, I watched Janet's world crumble with the same methodical inevitability she'd used to steal from me. First, the Lake Tahoe condo was seized and sold at auction. The proceeds, $43,000, went directly into an escrow account for my restitution. Then her car, a luxury SUV she'd bought in 2018, was repossessed. Another $8,000. Her wages from her part-time job at a real estate office were garnished at the maximum legal rate. Every paycheck, a portion came to me. Tom filed for divorce. I heard about it through Linda, who'd stayed in touch with some of the extended family. Apparently, he claimed he hadn't known about the fraud, that Janet had hidden it from him. He wanted to protect his assets before the criminal trial. Janet's children stopped speaking to her. Her daughter posted on Facebook about parents who destroy everything. It went viral in our small community. The criminal trial came in January, 3 months after the civil judgment. Janet pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence. The prosecution had too much evidence: the bank records, my receipts, her own recorded confession, her courtroom testimony. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 3. I attended the sentencing hearing. Janet, in an orange jumpsuit, looked 20 years older than when I'd last seen her. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she turned to me. "I'm sorry, Margaret," she said, her voice hollow. "I was desperate. I made terrible choices. I'm sorry." I said nothing. Apologies didn't return 10 years of my life. By March, I'd received $76,000. The full restitution plus most of the punitive damages. Susan's fees had been paid from the judgment. The remaining money would come from Janet's ongoing wage garnishment, even from prison jobs. But something unexpected happened with that money. I didn't need it the way I once had. My children were established in their careers. My grandchildren were grown. The house was paid off. My retirement income was sufficient. So I made a decision. I donated $20,000 to the Sacramento Senior Advocacy Center, the organization that had reached out to me during my case. They used it to create a legal aid fund for elderly victims of financial fraud. I gave $15,000 to Emma, my granddaughter, to help pay off her student loans. She cried when I handed her the check. I took David, Linda, and James, with their families, on a trip to Europe, the vacation Robert and I had always planned. We scattered some of his ashes in the Tuscan garden he'd always wanted to see. $20,000, and worth every penny. The rest I kept in a savings account for emergencies and small pleasures. Real ones this time, earned honestly. The Sacramento Bee finally ran my story in April. Local widow fights back against elder fraud wins. Other media picked it up. I did a few interviews, hoping my story might help others recognize the warning signs. Letters arrived from across the country. Other widows, other victims thanking me for speaking out. Some shared their own stories of family betrayal. Others asked for advice. I answered every single one. The Senior Advocacy Center asked me to speak at their annual fundraiser. I stood in front of 200 people and told my story, not as a victim, but as someone who'd fought back and won. The hardest part, I told them, wasn't the legal battle. It was accepting that someone I loved and trusted had deliberately hurt me. But once I accepted that truth, everything else became clear. Document everything. Trust your instincts. And never, ever let shame or fear stop you from seeking justice. The standing ovation lasted 2 minutes. Janet remained in prison, her appeals denied, her reputation destroyed. I heard through the grapevine that even after release, she'd be paying me garnishments for years. I felt no pity, just the cold satisfaction of complete victory. Justice, I learned, wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability, about saying clearly and firmly, what you did was wrong and you will face consequences. And consequences had been faced. Fully, absolutely, without compromise. A year after the verdict, my life looked completely different. I'd used part of the settlement money to finally fix the roof. No more bucket in the spare bedroom during rainstorms. I renovated Robert's garden, adding new rose varieties he would have loved. Every morning, I had coffee there, surrounded by blooms and birdsong. My relationship with my children deepened. David visited monthly now, sometimes bringing his kids. Linda and I took a cooking class together in Sacramento. James and I started a tradition of weekly video calls where he'd teach me about technology, and I'd tell him stories about his father. Emma, my granddaughter, graduated debt-free and sent me a photo of her diploma with a note. "This is because of you, Grandma. Thank you for fighting." I joined a local book club, the one I'd quit 10 years ago to save money. The women there treated me like a hero. "You did what most of us are too scared to do," one of them said. "You stood up to family." The Senior Advocacy Center made me a volunteer counselor. Once a month, I met with elderly victims of financial fraud, helping them document their cases, connecting them with lawyers, showing them they weren't alone. I discovered I was good at it. Maybe all those years of keeping meticulous records had prepared me for something meaningful. I traveled. Not extensively. I was still 73 with arthritis in my knees, but I saw the Grand Canyon with Linda, visited David in Portland, spent Christmas in Seattle with James. I went places and did things I'd denied myself for a decade. I even started dating. Nothing serious, just coffee with a widower named Frank I'd met at the senior center. He made me laugh, and we compared stories about our late spouses without sadness, just fond memory. My grandchildren asked me to speak at their schools about standing up for yourself. I told them about documentation, about trusting evidence over emotion, about the difference between family loyalty and enabling criminals. Life wasn't just good, it was full. Meanwhile, Janet's life had become a cautionary tale. She served 3 years before being paroled. I heard about her release through Detective Garcia, who called to let me know. She's out, but she's required to continue payments until the full judgment is satisfied. She also has 10 years of probation. Janet moved to a small apartment in a rough part of Sacramento. Tom had divorced her, taken the kids, remarried. Her children refused to speak to her. At family gatherings, which I still attended, head held high, people avoided mentioning her name. She'd lost her real estate license due to the fraud conviction. She worked at a discount grocery store, stocking shelves. Every paycheck was garnished. Her daughter posted a long Facebook message about growing up realizing your parent is a criminal, about the shame and anger. It was shared thousands of times. Janet became locally infamous. The condo was gone. The SUV was gone. Her credit was destroyed. Her reputation was destroyed. Her family was destroyed. I ran into her once at the grocery store where she worked. I was buying flowers for Robert's grave. She was restocking canned goods in aisle 7. Our eyes met across the store. She looked old, worn, defeated. For a moment, I thought she might approach me. Maybe apologize again, maybe try to explain. But she just looked away and continued working. I bought my flowers and left. I felt nothing, no triumph, no pity. She was just a stranger who'd once hurt me and was now facing the consequences. Harold, Robert's brother, who'd tried to convince me to drop the case, reached out a year later. He called to apologize. "I should have believed you from the start," he said. "I chose family loyalty over truth. That was wrong. Janet's been calling me from prison, asking for money, and I finally see what you saw all along. She's manipulative, dishonest, and she hasn't changed at all." I appreciated the apology, but I didn't need it anymore. My life had moved forward. The extended family slowly realigned. The ones who'd believed Janet's lies about my confusion either apologized or faded away. The ones who'd supported me remained close. I learned who my real family was. It wasn't always the people you shared blood with. It was the people who stood by you when truth mattered more than comfort. 2 years after the verdict, I received a letter from someone who'd read my story in a newspaper. She was a widow in Ohio whose brother-in-law had been taking money under similar pretenses. My case had given her the courage to investigate, and she'd discovered a fraud similar to mine. "Because of you, I fought back," she wrote. "I won. Thank you for showing me it was possible." I put that letter in a frame next to Robert's photo. This was my legacy now. Not the woman who'd been defrauded, but the woman who'd fought back. I planted a new rosebush in the garden, a variety called Courage. It bloomed red and strong, just like justice. Looking back, I learned, trust but verify. Document everything. You're never too old to fight for what's right. I'm 74 now, surrounded by people I trust. My money is my own. So I ask you, if family betrayed you, would you fight back? What would you do? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories. Thank you for listening.